Hey everybody, are you ready to start piecing? I bet. I'm sure a lot of you have all your pieces cut out and you're ready to go if you haven't already started. But today we're going to talk about HSTs, also known as half square triangles. I sew a lot of them and some people are not fond of them. I'm not really sure why. I find them to be really straightforward, but maybe that's because I've sewn probably thousands of them at this point. Okay, so the half square triangles we are working with in this quilt are two different sizes. The large ones are 8 7/8 of an inch, and the small ones are 4 7/8 of an inch. So basically what that means, let me grab this, is that you're cutting out, if you need 2 or more, or even numbers, you're cutting out a square. So here's the square. That is 8 7/8 of an inch. And then when you slice it diagonally, hey, lo and behold, you get 2 8 7/8 of an inch triangles. If you only need one of a certain color and you are, working with limited quantities of fabric, you'll want to just cut just the triangle. You don't want to overcut extra bits. Okay, so there are two ways of doing this. You can cut 8 7/8 of an inch. If you're going to do something like that and you're concerned about being exact with your measurements, I just want to let you know, I bought this a few months ago. It's the first time I've used it. It's the Creative Grids ruler. So I tried it out. I love it. It's got all my 1/8 of an inch markings marked really clearly. It's got a diagonal line marked really clearly, and it's got these little, I guess this is the Creative Grids thing, is that they've got these little bumpy circles on the bottom so that they don't slide. The rulers don't slide at all when they're on your fabric. So I use this to cut out, and it's a nice big one. It's a 12 by 12 square. So I use this to cut exactly 8 7/8 of an inch. If you're concerned about cutting exactly, you can cut 9-inch squares. And for the smaller pieces, you can cut 5-inch squares. And then you cut diagonally. And then once you get them pieced into your pieced block, your half square triangle block, then you would take a ruler and you would trim that 1/8 of an inch off, or any extra off, okay? But yeah, you can always cut a little larger and trim down. Better to cut larger than too small. All right, so yeah, Creative Grids rulers, pretty cool. This is like the only, I have like 3 rulers. That's it. I'm not a big ruler person, but it's really nice. It's good to splurge. Okay, so today we're working on the large half square triangles. And because I use a lot, I sew a lot of these, I like to make it as efficient as possible. So I do like to chain stitch these. So I've already got 1, 2 here. I don't tend to use pins, but if you're new to quilting, I highly recommend that you use pins whenever you can, just to keep everything in place. I used to pin these and now I don't. Oh, here's the other side. So with these pieces, I used a ruler. These ones, you'll notice, look a little different. They've got these dog-eared corners already because I used a die cutter. I have an AccuQuilt Go die cutter, so I use that when I'm cutting large quantities of triangles. So these ones were used a die cutter. So with these, I'm going to line this up on top of my colored square, triangle, whatever. I haven't had enough coffee. Okay, that one. I'm going to do this one. And I'm doing right sides together. So this is the printed side. And that, if that was a print, that would be the printed side. Right sides together. Then, if I was going to pin these, this is how I pin. You might find it awkward, but I recommend that you try it. I pin where I sew. So I don't, unless I'm doing garments, which is extremely rare, I don't pin in this direction. I pin in this direction. So I'm pinning where my machine is going to sew, and I'm pulling out the pins before my needle actually reaches them. So on these larger ones, I would just put in you know, 3 pins, okay? Or if I'm really comfortable with sewing HSTs, I'm not going to pin them at all, but I might have a few set up and ready to go, lined up and ready to go into my machine because I'm going to chain piece them. All right, so I've got my 1/4" foot on my machine. It's got the flange on it. I've set up my stitch width to 2.4 and I've got it at the 1/4" stitch. Here's another thing. Sometimes my machine, I love it, it's amazing, but sometimes it likes to eat this corner. So, especially with smaller pieces, so I might use a leader, what's called a leader. It's just a little scrap of fabric, it just gets your stitches started. So I'm going to stick that under there first, drop my foot, get it started, and once I have that piece through, I'm going to feed this one into it. Okay. So with chain stitching, I'm going to get this one done, and then as it comes out, I'm going to feed the next one in. Something weird just happened there. Okay. That way you're not stopping and starting, you're not finishing one piece and starting a whole new one. And I would just keep doing that with as many half square triangles as I can. I take them out and see how they're like stuck together, like little buddies. I'll take some scissors. I cut them apart. Cut my leader off. And this little scrap, this little leader piece, you can just keep using it when you start off your stitching. And then when the pieces get really wild, I just trim them off, but I just keep starting off my chain stitching with these little guys until they get really scrappy, and then I toss them. Okay, so there you've got some half square triangles, and what I like to do is, see this little corner here? I like to trim before I open them up and iron them, so I'm going to just take scissors, trim that one, and trim that one. And then that way when I iron it open, there won't be any dog ears sticking out. Ta-da! Look at this beautiful half square triangle. Okay. And for these, because I am sewing with white fabric, I may choose to iron all my seams to the darker fabric. If I chose to iron them this way, you may end up being able to see seam allowance through the white. That doesn't really bother me overall, but I have no hard and fast rules. The other option would be to iron all your seams open. Because this quilt has triangles going in so many directions, you may end up having seams come together where you end up with like 4 layers of fabric together. So ironing all your seams open on the back for these larger pieces, the larger half square triangles specifically, ironing those open might be helpful when it comes to seam bulk. Okay, so you can iron them open or just iron them to one side, and as you're piecing you may have to make a few little adjustments along the way to where the seams are landing. But overall, that's it. Half square triangles are pretty straightforward. All right. Yeah, that's it. Are there questions? They're pretty, I don't know, I find them easy. Boom, done. Set them aside, okay?